to Good Morning Kenya. My name is Mike Migu, and after that spirited conversation revolving around politics with Victor Olo and his guest, now we shift gears and talk about children literature, which is a very important aspect because let me quote somebody. His name is William Nicholson. He said, "We read to know we are not alone." And with children literature, children read to know they are not alone. And it is one of the things that help them process emotions. And to help me in this conversation in studio, I'm joined by Muthoni Thagwa, who is an anthropologist and also a children's book author. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'm happy to be here.
Karibu sana to Good Morning Kenya.
Asante sana.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Now, you're an anthropologist.
Yes.
Why children literature?
Because anthropology talks about the human condition. Okay. Everything human, anthropologists are interested in.
Yes.
And what would be more interesting to a human being than our children and their future and their learning and their discovery of the world that we have created, both natural and cultural.
Yes.
Yes, so I thought that I can bring some of this information to children in very simplified way in which they can understand.
It's good that you've said in a very simplified way, which is supposed to be the case. Now, talk about how children's literature help them, especially in the development of their intellectual capacity and also language development.
It's where learning literature is very critical for children in learning. And one of the things that we have previously done is to teach children in methodologies that are difficult for them to understand. Because when you tell a child A is for apple or S is for snow, these are foreign concepts to a child, to a Kenyan child. How many rural Kenyan children eat apples? If you tell a child A is for ant, they immediately begin to identify with the letter A because they've all seen an ant. They all know what an ant is. They all have ant, a name for ant in their own language. Do we have a name for an apple in our languages? We don't. So this is demystifying learning and making it so simple that a child jumps into the learning process, absorbs literature effortlessly without thinking, oh, this is a difficult thing. This is something that the teacher will say or the headmaster will say. No, learning is lifelong, Mike. It's continuous. And it has to be made as simple and as beautiful as possible, especially for our children. Yes.
And with simplified language, children can relate to what is happening in literature. Let's say, for instance, there's a story that is being told, and each story comes with a moral lesson. Why is that important?
It's critical for learning. As I have said, children, and you've touched on a very important thing, that literature is not about the written word. Literature, we have oral literature. So we have our stories, and our stories are meant to teach us. And it's not just the stories, even the sayings that we have in our cultures, in our languages. So if a child does something wrong and the parents tells them, "Asiyesikia la mkuu," already the child is in literature, oral literature. They are learning. So when you make these things so simple and they are teaching life lessons, they are building up on the growth and development of a child. A child begins to understand the pros of doing these and the cons. And the end, the moral of the stories having morals or sayings having morals is so important because it is from this that a child starts to philosophize, to agree, to take sides, to be a rightist, a leftist, or, you know, to be a Democrat, to be, you know, conservative, because of the lessons that they have had. So they start to ask, does this lesson work for me? If it doesn't work for them, then they take the next lesson. So literature is very, very important in that formation. Yes.
You've touched on something about oral literature. And one of the things that comes to the fore is the ability to speak confidently. Talk about the role it plays now, the oral literature, in enhancing a child's public speaking skills and confidence in addressing, let's say, people.
Mike, what everybody now agrees, psychologists, even UNESCO, is the importance of a child to be able to express themselves first in their own language. And you see, our own languages carry a lot of what you call weightless goods, very important things that cannot be measured or cannot be held. So it's in those sayings, it's in those lessons. The minute a child understands and synthesizes that, they're able, you cannot speak about what you don't understand. So the minute a child starts to understand that from all literature, they get the confidence to speak about it. If you're not sure about something, you cannot speak about it. So a child needs to be sure. This is what it is. It is a mango. It is a banana. It is the naughty hair. The minute they're sure about that, they can express themselves. And of course, expressing themselves helps your language to grow, helps you to synthesize and grow new ideas and to absorb additional ideas. So literature is very, very important in the development of a child.
Yes. There's also the aspect of emotion. Of course, there's fear, sadness, joy. How does children's literature now help them, or how is it synthesized to come down into a situation where it's easy for children to resonate with it and make it easy for them to express themselves in a manner that they can talk freely about what they are feeling, whether they are feeling sad, whether they are feeling joy, because storybooks come in different forms and emotions have to be addressed within that context. How is that achieved?
That, Mike, is achieved by what we call genre of literature. And this means that each story, you can be telling a true story, you can be telling a fictitious story, you can be telling a sad story, you can be telling a funny story. So when it is in the written form, one of the ways to draw into the emotion is to have children using literature outside of the school environment, because the school environment by its nature is structured in a certain way.
Yes.
And there's only, I think, 40 minutes in a lesson,
yes,
or less than an hour. There's not much you can do that. But at home, when you use literature on children to help them learn, if you're cooking, you can break into a song. You can break into a song. If you're cooking and the child starts to feel the emotions that are in the song, you can start to weep or pretend to weep, which a teacher may not be able to do. So you say, oh, and the lion was sad, and you start to get sad. And a child gets very involved and they start to learn. What is sad? What is happy? Why would I be sad? Why would I be happy? The other thing that you can do, especially when it's printed, is illustrations. Because illustrations, you know what they say about a picture? It tells a story in itself.
Yes.
So just looking at an animal or a drawing of a person, a child can tell the emotion therein. And you can find that children can really be captivated by literature. You can find a child has a favorite page. The page may be with a rabbit or a baby. And every time they take the book, they immediately go to that page and they look at it. And if you ask them, you will be surprised by the myriad of things and emotions that they're feeling about that particular page. And they should have an opportunity to be asked about this, not in a formal environment. Yes.
You know, literature outside the school setting is also an important aspect, especially when you're dealing with kids. And that brings about the question of where parents do not leave this aspect of teaching literature to kids, to teachers. There's also the aspect where the parents should take the responsibility of, say, reading a storybook to a child. Why is that important, that it should not be something that is left alone to teachers only?
Mike, you've touched on very interesting elements. A rural child in Kenya today is still very much exposed to literature. It may not be written as in books, but they are exposed to literature because the grandparents, the neighbors, the community the child is living in a community that allows them to be exposed to this literature. In urban environments, unfortunately, the idea of community is more fragmented than in the rural areas. So parents, family members, grandparents, aunties, cousins have to take the responsibility of being part of the community of literature for children. Otherwise, what is happening now is that a lot of our children, especially in urban areas, are left to the lyrics of songs because that can't be prevented. They hear them on the way to school, they hear them in buses, they hear them in matatus. So the lyrics are becoming a very powerful tool in terms of literature for children. But the danger here is that you cannot control the message or the ideology that is being passed on by the song. And also, parents need to be involved so that you control the narrative of what the child learns. Because contemporary music can have all sorts of lessons that may not be so easy for a young child to synthesize. So you can choose what the child hears, what the child learns, so that they get ideas and concepts that they can synthesize, because those are very important for their growth and for understanding current issues. Yes.
What are the characteristics, or the necessary characteristics of children literature?
Children's literature, first of all, should be engaging. And it must appeal to all the senses. If you can put illustrations with beautiful colors, children are attracted to colors. If you can put different emotions, some stories will have adventure, some will have fatigue, some will show just the way the day drags on, because that's reality and that's a lesson that a child needs to learn. So the tempo of a story has to be such that a child is learning different things as the story goes on. Yes. Yes.
And also, where does cultural diversity now, what role does it play in all this? Because yes, we are teaching literature to kids, but where is culture coming along in this?
You know, Mike, that's a very important question, because cultural diversity has been recognized as one of the key elements, not just for the growth and understanding of a child, but also their linguistic ability to be able to express ideas that are foreign to them. They must first learn their own ideas. Also, it is very, very important for children to learn within their cultural context. It's so important for understanding, cohesion, and intersocietal integration. Because the sayings that I have in the literature of my own community may agree with the ones in your community. So already the minute we use those, we are in agreement. If we are not in agreement, it creates an opportunity, an unconflict situation to ask you, oh, and why do you say that in your culture? While in my culture, we say this. So already we are having a very peaceful dialogue that creates a basis for understanding, which is not confrontational. So it's in the mode of learning something new, hearing something new that is different from mine. It is very, very critical, Mike.
In the space of, in the aspect of imagination and creativity, you know, children with very young age, they can be very creative. But now, how does this literature help in bringing out those two aspects, imagination and creativity?
Literature is the fantastic place where a child can grow their creativity and imagination, because children are very curious. When they read a book, or when you read to them a book, or when you tell them a story, it is very rare that a child will not have questions. In fact, they may interrupt you, and you must allow it. Why did the hare jump? Say, because the hare is cheeky, they like to jump. And then at the end they will ask, what happened? They want to know beyond what you have told them. And when you tell them that these are imaginary stories, then they realize that their imagination is fertile and it is good for their growth and for their own creativity. Stories also encourage children to start not really daydreaming, but think of the impossible. and to create possibilities that they don't see in their own environment. So when you tell a child that a story is fiction, whereas maybe they have heard about America and they're thinking, oh, yeah, I don't know, I've never left my village. But when you ignite their imagination, they start to see possibility. They're like, oh, even that America is real, that ocean is real, that Himalayas is real. And the imagination is ignited. And they start to understand that what I may have is very beautiful, but it's not all that there is. There's much more out there.
What about the aspect of critical thinking?
Critical thinking is also ignited in the sense that a child starts to understand life is not just what you see, what you hear, and what you learn. And that before what we see was the way it was, it might have been something else. So they start to understand that before a chair was a chair, it was a tree. Because if you show a kid a wooden chair, can you imagine, they wouldn't connect it with a tree. But now you start to make them think critically that this was once a tree, maybe from a story. You've told the story of how the tree was locked down and it turned into a chair. And the child thinks, oh, wow, really? So it makes them, it helps to develop not only their logic, but also to grow their thinking capacity. Yes.
Now that you've been involved in writing children literature, how has the evolution been? How can you say this aspect has evolved with time?
I must say that we have taken quite a bit of time to move from oral traditions, which are very, very powerful. But the limitation with oral tradition is that I must be there to pass them on. A human being has to be there. Whereas a book, you can leave a book here and a child will come and read it. So it has taken a bit of time. And also in Kenya, we have concentrated way too much, in my opinion, on literature for education, as opposed to literature for lifelong learning, where a child learns because that's what is going to happen throughout your life. You're going to learn new things. So we base it on the curriculum, and that is limiting in itself. Education is very important, the formal education, but learning has to be in and out of school. So I think there's room, there's really a lot of space. We've had a lot of improvements. We have a lot of children's authors, many are known, but there's still room for growth. Yes.
What about enhancing interpersonal skills for kids? Because let's say, for instance, there's a book reading session or a storytelling session, which I do not know if it's still there for kids. How does that enhance interpersonal skills, especially for kids?
Again, Mike, I go back to our traditional cultures. We had our moms tell us stories. We had our grandparents tell us stories. That environment doesn't exist anymore. Now we have authors telling stories. So almost every author who's produced a children's book usually have a storytelling session where the children come and you sell them the idea of your book. You sell them the concept of your book. You tell them the story. You engage them. And it's one of the most fascinating things that can happen to children and that can happen to a children's book. We Kenyan authors regularly have story reading sessions with children. We just had one at the National Theatre with the Makondo Festival, and it was really, really, really enlivening.
Yes.
Yes, children really love it.
Yes.
Yes.
You've authored a book here called KBC on Safari.
Yes.
This one. And it has lots of illustrations inside.
Yes.
So what inspired that, and how do illustrations help, especially when it comes to the comprehension aspect for kids?
Illustrations are very important. One, as I said, in igniting the imagination and also creating a reality for children. So in the book, I have used animals to tell children about A to Z, but I'm very conscious that not every Kenyan child has seen an elephant. Not every Kenyan child has seen a tiger. So illustrations help children to envision what that may be, even when they have not seen it. But the biggest advantage that I've put in the book is that these are things that are within the reach of a child. So a child knows if they go to the national park, they will be able to see a lion. It also creates anticipation. It markets our own country to ourselves, and it also creates an interest in our natural heritage, which is very, very rich, as you know, and we've marketed it internationally.
Yes. You know, World Health Organization has said that, or says literacy should combine or incorporate this, the aspect of health teaching in the classroom. How can that be incorporated now in small kids' literature and help them in managing their emotions, one, and also as a tool to promote health, health, especially when it comes to mental health for kids in school?
So mental health, of course, is going to be expressed and explored in the variety of emotions that we discussed: excitement, sadness, joy, stress. So all this should be in stories, so that children learn that this is the normal way of living. Other stories can be written specifically to have a health related moral. For example, if you're writing literature about home and cooking, you can incorporate issues like washing the hands, hygiene, and all those can be in the story, so that a child is not being told, wash your hands every day. It's tiring, it's boring. But if you say, when you want to cook really good matoke, you must first wash your hands so that there are no germs in the food, that's interesting for a child. They're like, oh, is that so? So good food needs to be hygienically prepared. So we can intertwine all these themes in children's literature, again, to make lifelong learning fun. Because learning should not be tedious. Yes.
Your parting shot?
My parting shot is, let's engage our children. Let's involve our children in literature, both oral and written. And let parents not leave this role to schools only. We have a big possibility to engage our children in lifelong learning through literature. That was our time. And thank you. All right.
Yeah, thank you for making time to come on Good Morning Kenya.
Asante sana.
Talking about children literature.
Asante.
That is Muthoni Thagwa, who is an anthropologist and a children's book author, speaking to us about children literature. This is where we cap this conversation. Don't go too far. Good Morning Kenya continues